Vanished. There is something romantic about a lighthouse. It may be the thought of these pencil-thin buildings standing tall and strong in the middle of the ocean, daring the worst that the weather can do as they shine their warning light for night after night. Or perhaps it's the men that work there, in what must have been the loneliest and at times scariest job in the world. It would take a unique kind of man to take on that occupation, to live out there surrounded by dangerous seas, knowing that if things went wrong there was nobody to turn to, nobody to help, nobody to call. Scottish lighthouses guard some of the worst seas in the world, with savage squalls, treacherous currents, and half-hidden reefs always ready to pulp an unwary boat into matchsticks. Many have intense history, such as the Bell Rock, with its tales of piracy, privateers and wartime mines, or the Soul Skerry at the edge of 3,000 miles of rolling Atlantic, where the lighthouse men were said to listen to an ethereal choir singing just beyond the horizon. Of them all, the Flannan Islands Lighthouse is arguably the most famous, simply because it was the scene of a mystery. The Flannan Islands are also known as the Seven Hunters, and sit beleaguered by the growling waves of the Atlantic, some 20 miles west of the island of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides. Before the lighthouse was built in 1899, nobody had lived there since the distant past, and since the lighthouse became automated in 1971, nobody has lived there again. When the term desert island is used, the normal image would be of a tropical atoll. There's nothing tropical about these islands. They are bleak, dour, grim and hard as they face the unrelenting force of the Atlantic breakers. As far as can be ascertained, the only people to voluntarily live here before the lighthouse keepers were hardy Celtic monks, although even this apparent fact is disputed. The beehive-shaped structures that hug the gneiss may have been used by druids, or by seamen from Lewis who spent time collecting seabirds for feathers, flesh and eggs. Seabirds were a valuable commodity for the people of the Hebrides, with the population of St Kilda virtually depending on seabirds for their survival. The sanctity of the Flannan Islands was such that those Lewis men who landed on those islands turned diesel, sunwise, as soon as they arrived, and then thanked God for their safe passage. They were also careful not to use certain words while they were there. These islands were considered different from other places in the Hebrides. That did not prevent them being used in the general economy, as there were also a number of sheep left to graze in this uncomfortable spot, safe from rustlers, unless a passing fishing boat took a fancy to some salt-flavoured mutton. In appearance, the islands are equally unusual. They rise vertically from the sea to a height of nearly 90 metres, although spray from breaking waves often renders them all but invisible. They are not quiet islands for all their reputation for sanctity. The largest of the group is the 39-acre Eilean Mor, Big Island, and this is where the Northern Lighthouse Board built their 74-foot-high lighthouse to help guide ships away from the Flannan Goop and hopefully safely around Cape Wrath, the appropriately named Cape of Turning that marks the northwest extremity of the Scottish mainland. There were 3 men based on the Flannan Light, and right from the outset they knew it was going to be a hard posting, when one man died when he fell from the light. Another 4 were drowned when their boat capsized, and all the time the Atlantic waves pounded the cliffs and gales screamed around the light. There were bright spots though, as the islands had surprising fertility, so the keepers could tend sheep and poultry to supplement their diet. And all the time the islands and the sea waited their opportunity, and the spirit of the Flannans watched. Yet the keepers kept the light shining, did their duty and guided ships to safety off that dangerous coast. There were 4 keepers in the crew, with 3 on duty at the lighthouse at any one time. They rotated their service, with 2 months on the light and 1 month at the shore station at Breesclip, Loch Rogue. Such was life for the keepers. As the months passed, they grew used to it, and then they vanished. It was on the 15th of December 1900 that the world first noticed something was wrong. A ship passed the islands that night and realised there was no welcoming light. All was dark on the 7 Hunters. The master reported what he had not seen, but the authorities could not react. The weather was rough and there was no way of reaching the lighthouse. Anyway, there was no serious cause for alarm, as a fog had wrapped round the entire coast, dimming all lights. It was not until the 26th of December that Hesperus, the relief vessel, battered through the seas to Eilean Mor. It took only minutes for Joseph Moore, the relief keeper, to realise that something was seriously wrong. There was no friendly greeting at the landing stage, no light, no reply to his increasingly frantic signals, and when he scrambled ashore, no sign of anybody on the island. Captain Jim Harvey has Hesperus's horn blown, and the crew pointed to the lighthouse's flagpole, from which no flag flew. Moore dashed up the long staircase, opened the gate on the outer door, and thrust inside the lighthouse. The clock was stopped, the beds were made, the place was all clean and tidy, the blinds were on the windows, and even the cutlery was bright and clean. All was nearly as it should be, except for the lack of men. Moore called for help, and 2 sailors from Hesperus landed to search. They scoured every nook and corner of the lighthouse and found a few clues as to what might have happened. There was damage to the railings outside the cable railway, and the box that held the mooring ropes at the west landing stage had completely vanished. This box had been very securely fastened to the ground and was some 120 feet above the sea. Some of the contents were found strewn among the rocks. The oilskins and sea boots of 2 of the keepers, James Ducat and Thomas Marshall, were missing, but those of the third, Donald MacArthur, still hung forlorn from its peg. Moore checked the log. It had been a westerly gale on the 12th and 13th of December, followed by a relative calm on the 14th. The log had been filled in until 9 in the morning of the 15th, then nothing. They were only blank sheets of paper. The men who were investigating that eerie lighthouse surmised that whatever had happened on the morning of the 15th. There were many theories about what happened. Some were bizarre, such as the idea that aliens had abducted the keepers. Some were ugly, such as the idea that one of the keepers had gone insane and had murdered the others before jumping into the sea himself. Some thought that a giant bird had killed all 3 men. There was a growing myth of a half-eaten meal in beds unmade, mainly due to the poet Wilfred Wilson Gibbon, who wrote his Flannan Isle in 1912. Most strange of all was a half-hinted story that the spirit of the islands themselves had killed the men. The reality is probably more prosaic. Although the main storm of the 12th and 13th had died down, the Atlantic is prone to rogue waves. It seems probable that one huge wave came just as 2 of the men were working at the box that held the mooring ropes. The wave washed both men away, and when MacArthur came to help, a following surge took him as well. Or so the scientists and professional seamen say. However, the islands were never considered as quite canny. There were always stories, and perhaps, just perhaps, something else happened that day. The end. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and press the wee bell notification. And a huge big thank you to all my subscribers and patrons. See you next week. Bye bye.